SD Gundam Battle Alliance is the latest Gundam game to grace Steam. And while it's definitely not the disaster that some reviews make it out to be, it's also not without its flaws either. Let's dive in. The game begins very seriously with a cutscene depicting your squadron, a special data gathering squadron, at Odessa. And rather than the cutesy SD mobile suits that were advertised, they're the real deal. But don't worry, some kind of glitch happens that transports you to the G universe, a world where all the mobile suits are SDs, but nobody seems to notice. Another thing that nobody really seems to notice or care about is that your two wingmen are now gone. But good riddance, you can replace them with famous Gundam characters that will give you special boosts in combat that will also get stronger the better friends you become with them. You win some, you lose some. The rest of the story is very simple. The G universe is like a library of all Gundam media, but something went wrong. Mobile suits from different times and universes are appearing in places they shouldn't. These are the so-called break missions, and by clearing them, you'll then be able to play a fixed true mission. But don't worry, you don't have to play through the same mission twice. Yet. Some true missions vary only slightly, but most of them will be on a different map or set in a different time, so there's definitely enough variety here. The less varied missions though are the Chaos missions that you unlock about halfway through. These are literally the same mission, but just with one extra boss battle popping up, if you can find it. Sometimes they are a bit away from the regular flow of the mission, so you have to actively seek it out, otherwise the mission just plays out as normal. But to further the story, you only have to play the break and true missions. In theory. And this is where my first major complaint of the game comes into play. Unless you are insanely good, or you lower the difficulty to easy, like a scrub, you're going to need to grind, because the bosses are absolute bullet sponges. And this becomes even worse if you want to change mobile suits. Because now we get to one of the big advertised features of the game: customization. Or more accurately, your reason to grind. All this boils down to is you using your hard-earned cash to upgrade one of the 4 stats of your mobile suit. HP for hit points, boost for more thrust, and melee and ranged for more damage with their respective weapons. So no Gundam Breaker-esque customizations as some people were apparently expecting. But being basic isn't a problem in and of itself. The real problem lies with how stingy the game is. Even if you invest all of your cash into just the one machine you're using, you'll eventually hit a wall that can only be overcome with grinding. So what do you do if your favorite machine is only available in the mid to late game? Well, go play some of the better earning stages for a couple of hours, because every machine you get starts at level 1. And invested cash is non-refundable. There are also items you can equip to your mobile suit and skills you can equip to your pilot, but in my experience it's the customization, and therefore the grinding, that is the most impactful for the performance of your machine. Meaning that I was very lucky that my favorite was available very early on in the game. But grinding doesn't have to be a chore. If the gameplay is good enough, grinding should be fun. And you don't have to do it alone, you can even get your friends or strangers involved thanks to the online co-op mode. And for the most part, it is really fun. I instantly fell in love with the fast-paced action and the visual effects that accompany it. Because not only is it fun to play, it's also very nice to look at. The movements of your machine both look and control very smoothly, and you have a varied arsenal of weapons and special attacks at your disposal. A strong and weak melee attack, a ranged attack, 2 extra attacks that can either be ranged or melee depending on your machine, and of course a special attack accompanied by a special animation. And you've also got 3 classes of mobile suits to play around with, or at least you could if it wasn't such a chore to switch machines, but whatever. There's sharpshooters, all-rounders, and infighters. All three classes, or roles as the game calls them, are pretty self-explanatory, and they also come with a special role action. Sharpshooters can instantly replenish all of their ammo, all-rounders get a 1-minute buff for faster cancel timing, and infighters get a 1-minute buff that makes them resistant to stun and knockdown. But unfortunately, the gameplay isn't without its little annoyances, the worst of all being lock-on. It's just weird. I've had times where it decides to lock on the guy behind me, sometimes it doesn't want to switch targets, sometimes it doesn't want to lock on period, and it always seems to lock onto the thing that I don't want to lock onto. And if you're using a mouse, my condolences. And this becomes especially annoying when they put a mechanic in a level where being able to accurately lock on is extremely important. Why would you put a mechanic into your game that actively showcases something that the game is bad at? Next up, for the people who like to get close and personal with their mobile suits, remember that I said the visual effects were nice? Well, for Melee they went a bit overboard and they basically obscure everything that's going on. I'm no longer watching two mobile suits fight, I'm just watching explosions. And if you're thinking about avoiding that by going long range, then you'll soon figure out that the areas you're playing in are rather small, especially for boss battles. So if you're playing with a sharpshooter machine, expect to be hitting the area wall constantly. Oh, that's gotta be my pizza. Let's just pause the game and I'll be back in a second. Why doesn't the pause button actually pause the damn game? Next up then in the complaints corner is that you might have noticed that there's a lot of talking going on during the missions. Like, a lot. To the point that there's almost always someone saying something. And personally, I quite like it, but I can also see why some people wouldn't like it. The real problem though is trying to follow along with all of that chatter, because even though it appears on screen as English, the dub is Japanese only. And as we've already established, this isn't the easiest game around, especially not when fighting bosses. So good luck trying to survive and read the subtitles. And talking about the story, it's really just there to get you from point A to point B. There is a mystery going on, but I doubt anyone is going to lose any sleep over it. However, thanks to the great voice acting and fun dialogue that was translated with a fun twist, I did really enjoy the interactions between the characters. Whether it was between my operator and the G-Universe AI Sakura, or them and the canonical Gundam characters, it was all great fun.
随分と静かな戦場だぜ。新規性と思ったら音楽消えてたぜ。それじゃあ BGM オン。乗ってきたぜ。この曲好き。いい感じだ。このままアンコールまで突っ走ろうじゃねえの。
Or even the interactions between the Gundam characters from different universes during the missions. Then pepper in some references and you've got a recipe for perfection. And now here is a very me problem, but I'm sure other people will have the same issue. I like grunts, and while there are a lot of grunts in the game as enemies, only a handful of them are playable. Personally, I think it would have been awesome if every machine in the game was playable, even if the grunts lacked some moves, which is how they did it in Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2 from what I remember. Personally, I would have loved to play this game with the Leo space type. But to be fair, we do already have quite a wide roster already. And finally, because I played the game on the computer, let's talk about how it performs. Because Japanese games and computers don't always go hand in hand. And as with literally everything else, it was good for the most part, but just not quite perfect. We get a nice array of graphical options, but having the game capped at 60 FPS on computer should be a felony. and it's not really a demanding game either, so going above 60 should be easy. Apparently, except for some of the cutscenes where the FPS drops down to single digits. I don't know why the game does this, but it consistently tanks on the Cyclops scene. Also, don't believe what the Steam page tells you about the specs you need to play this game. Somehow, the recommended GPU for this game is an RTX 2080, and the minimum is a GTX 1060. Or to put it in more tangible terms, the minimum specs for Battle Alliance are roughly equal to the recommended specs of Doom Eternal. And something about that just feels off, so I wanted to see how this game would perform on a machine that wasn't even close to the minimum specs. One with a GTX 750 Ti and an Athlon 3000G. And by lowering the settings, the game was actually playable. So even if you only meet the minimum requirements, you're in for a great gaming experience. So, overall, as it is right now, SD Gundam Battle Alliance gets a solid 7 out of 10. It might not be perfect, but the negatives don't get in the way of an overall fun gaming experience. And that has been all for this review. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.